Okay, on pages 46 and 47, we're looking at the present tense of AR verbs. So in chapter 1, we saw one verb, which was the verb ser. And remember, with the verb ser, we had to change it according to the subject. And just like that, in Spanish, we have to change these present tense AR verbs according to the subject. The nice thing is the list on page 47, all of those verbs change the same way for each subject, okay? And what I like to do when I am conjugating these verbs is that I like to have a kind of a formula for that. And so, for example, if I have the verb hablar, which means to speak, for yo, remember yo meaning I change the AR ending, I drop that AR ending, and I add O, okay? And so for all of these AR verbs, that ending is O. Here, when I am conjugating these verbs or changing them for the subject, I get rid of that AR ending, and I keep this part, so, and then add the ending to it, okay? For tú, my ending, for tú, I add AS. And any verb that ends with AR, for tú, the ending is AS. For él and ella, and also usted, even though usted means you, they all have the same ending for the verb. So when I change the verb for those subjects, I add A. For nosotros and nosotras, I add amos. And for ellos, ellas, and ustedes, I add an. Okay, so this is true for other verbs that end with AR. So if I wanted to use the verb estudiar, for example, to study, I would do the same thing with it. So for yo, the ending would still be O. So instead of having hablar, estudiar, okay, I take off that AR ending and I add O. So, which becomes estudio. For tú, instead of having estudiar, I take off that AR ending and I add as, which becomes estudias. For él, ella, and usted, instead of estudiar, I take off the AR and I add a, which becomes estudia. For nosotros and nosotras, instead of using estudiar, I take off the AR and I add amos, which becomes estudiamos. For ellos, ellas, and ustedes, instead of using estudiar, I take off the AR ending and I add an, which becomes estudian. And notice that they have the same endings as the verb hablar up here. So all of those verbs on page 46 and 47 all of these verbs here will change the exact same way. And notice here that they have estudiar as one of the examples. If you go through all of these, bailar, buscar, notice that these are the infinitive of the verb. The infinitive of the verb for these verbs ends with AR. In English, the infinitive of the verb, remember when I was talking about the verb ser, the infinitive of the verb starts with the preposition to. So to dance, to look for, to walk, to sing, meaning that there's no subject. But in English, we add the subject, I dance, you dance, he dances, to tell who it is who's doing the dancing, okay? In Spanish, we change the ending to indicate who the subject is. And we'll talk more about how subject pronouns are not really necessary in Spanish as we get further on.